Last year, we had some major breakout players who helped fantasy managers win championships. Guys like Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And today, we are helping you find the next batch of players that we think can help you win your fantasy league. Dave Kluge is joining me here today, as always, on the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. We're going to go through 8 players. We got a couple different guys on here. And Dave, what exactly would you classify as a breakout? Is this a player that you think is going to vastly outproduce their ADP? Is this a player who's never done it before that we think is going to be a really valuable player in fantasy? Or is it just all of the above?
I'm looking at a guy who can outperform his ADP and a guy who can have a career season. I think that's kind of what constitutes as a breakout. So even when we were talking about this yesterday, naming some players, like Marvin Harrison is already getting steamed up early in drafts, but like I think Marvin Harrison could be a breakout player. Like we saw some good signs last year, but I think there's still so much meat on the bone that he hasn't even scratched the ceiling of his potential yet. But that might be a little bit too obvious. Rashee Rice, I think, is another guy that we could probably say is a breakout player. We saw the breakout over the second half of the season, and we saw last year before he got injured, we saw some really good production. But I think he's another guy that could potentially finish as a top 5 wide receiver and have a career year. But I wanted to get a little bit deeper with some of these guys as we get through the list. I will get progressively deeper, but for me, somebody who can outperform their ADP and somebody who's going to have the best career of their season or the best season of their career. Well,
Yeah. And I think that when it comes to a player that's breaking out, like I don't think there is any one description that fits the bill. It doesn't have to be a player that comes out of nowhere. It could be a guy that you're drafting as the wide receiver 20 and finishes as the wide receiver 5, or even
mhm.
a guy that you were drafting pretty high. Listen, guys, last year Drake London was getting drafted pretty high. He was being drafted as the wide receiver 12, if I remember correctly, and
Mhm.
finished as a top 10 wide receiver. Like,
Yeah.
that's a breakout.
Mhm.
He hadn't done it before. This was a player that I wouldn't say came out of nowhere, but he definitely surpassed expectations. So, Dave, I think that leads us pretty nicely here into the first player that you have on your list, and I think we started with that because I had the question: how is Jameson Williams a breakout after having such a good year last season? And right now, he's still being drafted as the wide receiver 24. I've got him as my wide receiver 26. That's probably just going to fluctuate all summer. You've got him as your wide receiver 20. So talk to us about why Jameson Williams could break out even further this year.
Well, he's just, first of all, an amazing prospect, and we never really got to see it. We got to remember, this guy was drafted 12th overall, coming off of an ACL tear. Like, the Lions knew that they were getting a 0 in year 1 of his rookie deal and still spent the 12th overall pick on him. And then, of course, after the ACL tear, then we also had the gambling suspension, and it has just been a very arduous start to Jameson Williams' career. And if you look at the first 25 games, which I did this morning, first 25 games of his career, he was averaging 3.4 targets and 32 yards per game, scoring about 0.2 touchdowns per game. And we were getting excited during that time because we saw some of the flashes. We saw the big plays. Like his one touch in his rookie season was a 41-yard touchdown reception. So we saw the upside there. But over the last 8 games, I'd argue that he already did kind of break out. Over the last 8 games of last season, 7 targets per game, 73 yards per game, and half a touchdown per game. You extrapolate that over a full season, and you're looking at potential wide receiver 1 production. But what gets me excited is, like you said, the ADP. He's getting drafted right now as the wide receiver 24. I've got him higher than that at wide receiver 20. And even that, I feel like I could move him up a little bit more. Last year, there was a big change in the offensive philosophy in Detroit. As Jameson Williams broke out, Sam Laporta started to find his footing again over the second half of the season. We saw a big dip in Amon St. Brown's usage. Not career low in target share, but the lowest target share since his rookie season. And a lot of people didn't realize because the fantasy production was still there, but he was scoring a lot of touchdowns last year. He had a career high in touchdown rate and career low in target share. And I get a little bit worried now with Ben Johnson out of the picture. We've talked a lot about Johnson and his affliction for slot receivers, whether it was Jarvis Landry or Danny Amendola. Those guys had career years with Ben Johnson. And now I wonder, with him out of the picture, if we see the sliders start to move a little bit. It doesn't take a whole lot to, take 2-3% target share from Amon St. Brown, put that in Jameson Williams' favor. And Jameson Williams is this guy who can score from anywhere on the field with eye-popping efficiency, that even if Amon St. Brown is still the wide receiver 1 in total targets, Jameson Williams could easily be the more valuable guy in fantasy football. So I'm trying not to overreact too much to this, but looking at some of the underlying peripheral metrics for Amon St. Brown, looking at the departure of Ben Johnson, I have Amon down at wide receiver 11 and 12 in my rankings. He's kind of lumped in there as a low end wide receiver 1. And Jamison Williams, who I'm ranking as the wide receiver 20, I think has a higher ceiling than anybody else going in that range. He could legitimately not just finish as a wide receiver 1, but be a top 5 or a top 3 player. He is that type of talent. And now the health issues are behind him. The gambling suspensions are behind him. And he could easily take over as the wide receiver 1 in this Detroit offense.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit higher on Amon St. Brown. I've still got him around like wide receiver 7 or 8. I'll say this. I know that we saw a Lions team that I wouldn't say lost their identity, but had to change their identity a bit last year. They lose David Montgomery. They lose so many pieces along the defense. And so the script sort of changed for that offense. It became a very pass heavy attack, especially with Jahmyr Gibbs also being part of that passing attack. And, I think that the points you've made here, Dave, are really good questions that we have to ask ourselves. Is what does this offense look like without Ben Johnson? Is it just more of the same? Is it ground and pound with two running backs and then get some nice easy passes out over the middle and intermediate areas to Amon St. Brown? It might not be. This is a team that might have to adjust the way they're doing things and say, hey, we need some more big explosive plays. Let's lean into Jahmyr Gibbs. Let's lean into Jameson Williams. And then we'll have our Sam Laportas and Amon St. Browns be the chain mover. So that's all very possible. I you know me, I'm a big fan of Jameson Williams. I got dunked on quite a bit for having him as the wide receiver 1 in that rookie class over Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And, the trends have been slowly but steadily going back in the other direction for Jameson Williams. So, no one's rooting harder for JMO to have a big year than me.
Yeah, and then I certainly don't want to discredit him on St. Brown. He's a great football player, but we have to remember his breakout at the end of his rookie season came after TJ Hawkinson was injured and after DeAndre Swift was injured. And then they traded TJ Hawkinson away. They traded DeAndre Swift away, and then there was nobody else really there in that offense. Like he was competing with Khalif Raymond and Quintez Cephas and guys I can't even remember trying to get targets in Detroit.
I was like, you're digging yourself in a hole here, Dave.
Yeah,
you're looking for the 5th wide receiver.
I think Tylan Wallace was the guy that people were getting excited about going into 2021, but now Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Jameson Williams, it's suddenly a much more crowded room. So again, not trying to use this as an opportunity to just dog on Amon St. Brown, but I've got him lumped in with Jaxon Smith-Njigba and AJ Brown, wide receiver 10, wide receiver 11, wide receiver 12. That's a tier for me. And when I look at Jameson Williams, I've got him in the same tier as Tyreek Hill. And I think that is a very good comp for Jameson Williams. Yeah.
That's reasonable. That's reasonable. I would say the thing that we're going to have to see from Jameson Williams is going to be that volume. We know that the big plays are there. That was the thing that made Tyreek so valuable in fantasy, especially with the Dolphins now. It's just been that volume. So yeah, but I can see this year, what is this, 4th year for Jameson Williams being sort of an early career Tyreek Hill. That is absolutely on the table there for him.
And 7 targets per game over the last 8 games. I mean, you look at that over a full season, that's 120 targets. And you give a guy with Jameson Williams' speed and game-breaking abilities 120 targets, that is easily a top 5, top 10 receiver.
Yeah. Well, we got more guys that we're going to talk about here. We've got 7 more players that we're going to give you guys. But before we do that, always got to remind you, you've got a bunch of ways you can enjoy this show. First, it's going to be right here on YouTube. So if you're watching this video and you've enjoyed it so far, just take a second, hit that little thumbs up, give the video a like, comment down below, tell Dave he's crazy for his Jameson Williams pick, or tell him you agree with him and you love him and you just want nothing but the best for Dave and Jameson. That's it. You just want nothing but the best. Also, of course, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you're subscribed there. And reminder, we've got a giveaway going on right now, big time giveaway of the Scott Fish Bowl spots. I was corrected the last time. We have 2. We still have 2 spots for the Scott Fish Bowl. This is how you enter to win. You leave a review over on the podcast, on Apple Podcast. Screenshot that, send it over to fantasyshow@footballguys.com. That gets forwarded to both Dave and I. Yeah, we get to look at those. And then if you've already done it, which we had someone who did this, hey, I already wrote your review, damn it. You put me in the running for this. He sent in the screenshot, and look at that. He's in the running. So if you already did it, send in that screenshot, guys. And we're going to be announcing that pretty soon because Scott Fish Bowl is coming up. And that's just a good, fun, charitable event where all the angry people in fantasy football come together to be nice for a whole week. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. All right. I'm going to go to the next player on here, Dave. And I can't believe I stole this one from you. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe you just didn't want him and you left it there as a trap. But I'm going with Rome Odunze, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears, who ADP's got him as the wide receiver 38. Dave, you have him ranked as the wide receiver 38. I'm slightly higher at wide receiver 34. I don't think that either of us are going to be taking any huge swings on Odunze as a player or taking any huge chances, but there are a lot of signs that do point. I think it's going to be how you depend. It's going to be very dependent on how you want to look at this player. You can find all the data points that say, bust incoming. And then there's a lot of context that you can look at and say, here's a guy who's just on the verge of a big time breakout, or at the very least, a highly productive NFL player. When we look at last season, you have the terrible circumstances with rookie quarterback Caleb Williams. Everything there in his performance should improve. They had a really bad offensive line, Dave. I know you were looking at this the other day, all the Caleb Williams sacks, and you were kind of laughing, saying like, and people will look you dead in the face and say this was Caleb's fault. Not
I mean,
the
there's so many
offensive line.
times he is just like takes his snap, and before he could even finish his drop back, there's just an unabated rusher just coming at him full speed.
Yeah, man. Like hands aren't even on the laces and you got a D tackle around your hips. Like
Mhm.
it's crazy. But they've made some big time additions to the offensive line, especially in that interior. And then also last year, we're talking about just bad game plan overall. This was just I'm not quite sure what the Bears were doing. They ended up having Keenan Allen being a guy that was getting so many of these high value targets in the intermediate and middle part of the field, taking that away from Rome Odunze. Now you bring in Ben Johnson, who is going to be using a lot of that pre-snap motion to get defenders out of position and also play action. That's going to be the big thing. An improved offensive line, a heavier use of play action is going to open things up for Caleb Williams, give him a little bit more time, because what we saw last year, Dave, was that Caleb Williams was actually one of the least accurate quarterbacks in the NFL when targeting the deep pass. And just want to throw this out there. Rome Odunze, second worst catchable target rate of any wide receiver over the last 3 years. That's from our friends over at Fantasy Pros. There's a guy on that list as well who was hanging out at fourth in that list, Nico Collins. That Rome Odunze kind of reminds me of a little bit, a guy who we know is going to find his home here on the outside. Is he a speedster like a Jameson Williams? No, but can he be a deep threat that can win vertically? Absolutely. Now, the problem last year was that we weren't always getting those kind of routes for Rome Odunze. The offense was just, if we're just being real, Dave, I'm sorry to say this, it was a mess. It was a mess. And I know the data bros are going to look at the yards per route run for Rome Odunze and say, it's just not there. This guy's not going to be able to make it. This should be a whole brand new look on this offense. This is going to be an offense that's going to give Caleb time. It's going to give Odunze opportunities. And while we're worried, who's going to be the slot receiver? Is it DJ Moore? Is it Luther Burden? Is it going to be Colston Loveland? We know the role for Rome Odunze. That is set. This is a guy who's going to be the X receiver on the outside. So I'm excited to see what happens there. And I think that he can, if this Bears offense is as good as we think it's going to be, he can absolutely beat his ADP of wide receiver 38. And by the way, right now, Luther Burden and Colston Loveland have been dealing with injuries all throughout OTAs and minicamp. If these guys aren't able to get healthy, this offense is going to be even more reliant on Rome Odunze.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The Luther Burden injuries are certainly concerning. This is a guy who's dealt with soft tissue injuries basically his entire college career. Got injured almost immediately when they started rookie mini camps, and has
Just
been able to
walked out of the
practice
locker
since.
room, sprained an ankle.
Right. So, I mean, if that's it, I mean, slot receiver is a tough role to get up to speed for, especially as a rookie. You know, you got to learn a lot. Ben Johnson asks a lot of his slot receiver too, not even just as a receiver, but also in the blocking game and in motion to open up other guys. And I think DJ Moore is probably prime for that role right now. So I think the downside with Rome Odunze is that he is that sacrificial X in the offense, that he just kind of does what Tim Patrick did last year and just clears out defenses so they can do more stuff underneath. But he's such a better player that you can see it's not just a sacrificial role. He can actually get downfield and make contested plays and make plays after the catch. So, it is kind of funny how quickly everybody soured on Rome Odunze. We got to remember this guy was drafted inside the top 10 just a year ago, and we saw the flashes. Like if you go back and you watch that game against Indianapolis, 11 targets, 6 receptions, 112 yards, and a touchdown. That was his third career NFL game. And then, as you said, the offense was just a mess. Matt Walden and I, we talked about this on the Launchpad last week. There were literally plays where Shane Waldron would draw up a play where all 3 receivers would run to the same exact spot. And then Caleb Williams would drop back, and there's just a cluster of guys in the middle of the field, and nobody's really open because
Horrible.
everyone's just, it was terrible. And we saw once Shane Waldron got fired and Thomas Brown took over, things immediately got on track because there was just better play calling. And I have faith that Ben Johnson, what we've seen over the last couple of years, is going to be a better play caller as well. So yeah, this is just a good player on an ascending offense, and sometimes it's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's weird because a lot of us are willing to forgive the, I guess, the sins of the Arizona Cardinals with Marvin Harrison Jr. and say, okay, I'm willing to draft him a little bit later, but he's going to be a breakout and he's going to be a value and he's being tabbed as a sleeper in a lot of places. Now, I get it. There's context that's needed. Harrison Jr. is the wide receiver one on his team, but we still don't know that he is the number one target on his team because Trey McBride is there. So, okay, let's chalk up both these guys as being the number two targets on their teams. The Cardinals offense didn't really get better. The Bears offense made a massive jump. You get a brilliant offensive mind in there who's had success, a better offensive line, and a developing quarterback who I think most people would believe that Caleb Williams is a better passer than Kyler Murray. So I don't know. I just feel like we're missing the boat on these guys and counting them out a little too quickly here, Dave.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think my rankings on these Bears wide receiver core, we haven't really gotten a clear picture yet. I think that'll start to,
Yeah.
you know, look a little bit clearer throughout training camp. But yeah, I mean, if Luther Burden is still unable to practice every day that he can't practice, he's going down in my rankings, and Roma Dunze is going up.
All right, let's go to another guy here. Tyjae Spears, running back out of Tennessee. Dave, he is the running back 41 in ADP. Both of us are ahead of average draft position. I've got him at running back 37. You've got him at running back 36. So talk to us about Tyjae Spears because he's a guy that's been looked at for the most part as a backup, a change of pace guy, a receiving back, whatever you want to call it. But there's tons of talent there.
And it's that. I mean, a young, talented running back. I'm going to have a theme with these final picks that I'm going to be talking about as breakout players because we see this all the time. Running backs struggle early in their career, and then once the game slows down for them a little bit, once they get up to NFL speed, then we see them break out in year 2 and year 3. That's a very consistent theme in fantasy football. And Tyjae Spears, just such a good player, man. You look back at that draft, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Zach Charbonnet, and Kendre Miller were all drafted ahead of him. But that's because Tyjae Spears doesn't have an ACL. Like it was medical reasons that caused him to fall in the
Not
draft.
a single ACL. Like both are just not there.
Yes. And we're not exaggerating. Like he literally doesn't have an ACL. And that was the concern is that he had these medical issues, but now 2 years in the NFL and he has been able to hold it together so far. I mean, this guy probably would have been the RB3 in the class ahead of Zach Charbonnet and ahead of Kendre Miller if he had a clean bill of health, but he didn't. And he is just such a good player, still relatively young, just turned 24 a couple of days ago. Tony Pollard getting up there at 28 years old. And this year, Tyjae Spears is actually getting drafted lower than he was last year because there was a lot of talk from Brian Callahan last year that we want this two-headed punch, that we want Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard to both be involved, and it very much so ended up being the Tony Pollard show. We're hearing that same talk now from Brian Callahan that he wants both of these running backs to be involved. Maybe we do see a split, but maybe we just see Tyjae Spears as a contingent bet that if Tony Pollard goes down, we can see the upside. And we saw one game last year where Tyjae Spears did get the start. 20 carries, 4 targets, 103 yards. I mean, he was able to formidably step in and be an RB1 in fantasy football and look good on his team. Now we're looking at the Tennessee Titans, hopefully trending upward with Cam Ward, a guy that I think is a very good quarterback. Hopefully kind of changes the culture around there a little bit. Sounds like he's been showing up at like 4 a.m. and grinding film and doing all the things that you want to see. Really just comes down to being a young, good player. That's a bet that I want to make. He's a little bit undersized, but just has that burst and the quick twitch ability and the long speed to rip off big plays. We've seen him in a limited role through his first couple of years in the league, but I'm going to bet on young, talented players, and that's what Tyjae Spears is.
So the Titans are one of those teams where I think you end up getting such a good draft value on all the players, not just Spears, but every single one of the players on this team, because it just feels like no one's looking at them. Everyone's expecting them to be bad, and they very well might be bad. This might be a really bad NFL team, but there can be some value there for fantasy football, especially if Cam Ward is even just halfway decent. I mean, I know we want to discount him because this was a bad quarterback year, and the next guy after him wasn't very good, and then everyone kind of focuses on the Shedeur Sanders fall, but this is a team with Brian Callahan, who you mentioned, Dave. I mean, like if he could put this together, and he's been part of good offenses, we can see it happen. There's some veterans on this team that might put them in scoring position more often than we think, and they're in a division where defense isn't always played. Just gonna say that. So they're gonna be in a competitive division. I'm excited to see what Cam Ward ends up doing, honestly, and especially with Tajay Spears there. If he ends up being a check down guy, it could be really valuable for him.
I'm blown away that the entire football and fantasy community has already just written Cam Ward off as being bad. Like, I've never seen a quarterback get drafted number 1 overall and garner such little hype. And I
Is
think
it that he's bad, or is it that people are just bored? Like, there's nothing, and this is no knock against Cam Ward. There's nothing that I think people find that stands out about him. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, the videos with him and Shador going back and forth are fun, but he's not like a hyper athletic runner. He's got a good arm, but it's not, like the cannon of an
creative arm. He does all the fun arm angles and can get underneath defenders and do those Patrick Mahomes-esque throws.
I think we're just spoiled. I think we're spoiled as fans. We're just not as entertained. Like, to me, Cam Ward is almost kind of like watching a live action movie after seeing the animated thing. We're like, okay, yeah, we've seen this before. We got it.
And we also have to. I mean, the last few quarterbacks drafted number 1 overall didn't immediately live up to expectations. Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence. I think that left a distaste in a lot of people's mouth, but I think we've overcorrected now where Cam Ward is getting ranked as like the QB 28 or wherever he's going right now. Like, people aren't even wanting to throw a dart on the unknown. And that's crazy to me. Like, we can't just, there's a lot of uncertainty in Tennessee, and maybe Cam Ward isn't going to be good, but maybe he will be good. And if he is, this reminds me of like that Houston Texans situation 2 years ago where everybody just agreed before the draft that CJ Stroud wasn't good. And then CJ Stroud lights it up, and Tank Dell and CJ Stroud and Nico Collins and everybody ends up being a great value in that offense. And right now it's kind of similar with Tennessee. Everybody's just decided that they're not going to be good. And if they are, it's going to end up making everybody on this team amazing values.
Well, we got a few more players that we're going to talk about here. But before we do that, I just want to remind everybody, we got a bunch of great shows over here at Football Guys. Not just the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show, but we've got the Dynasty Show with, of course, my co-host here, Dave Kluge, and his co-host over there, Jeff Bell. We've got the Audible with Sigmund Bloom and Cecil Lammy, the Hot Seat with Bob Harris. I was just on with Bob yesterday. That episode's going up today as well. On the Couch with Sigmund Bloom, where he brings in some of the biggest and most notable names in the fantasy football space. And Dave, you are also doing another show. You're a very busy man. Got the Launchpad here, where you've brought it back. There's a new twist to this, and your next guest is Andy Behrens, formerly of Yahoo, who I know you're very excited to talk to.
Yes. Yeah, he's going to come on. We're recording Thursday. Episode will come out Friday morning. That is audio only, but you can find that over podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, whatever. Should be a really fun episode talking with Andy.
Yeah, absolutely. So great name in the industry and has been doing it for such a long time, man. It's just hoping nothing but the best for him. Let's move on here. Let's get into our next players that we've got. And I want to talk about Josh Downs, wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. And Dave, another guy who's just going super late, wide receiver 48 in ADP. You and I both, we don't get it. We don't get it whatsoever. You've got him at wide receiver 41, 7 spots ahead. I've got him at wide receiver 36. I'm not playing games when it comes to Josh Downs. This is a guy who last year, wide receiver 31 in PPR points per game. However, when you look at the splits, when he had like I don't want to say this sounds mean, but a real quarterback that was there throwing the ball, which by the way, I've fully flipped to the Daniel Jones side of things on this Colts quarterback thing. But when Joe Flacco was there, 15 and a half fantasy points per game for Josh Downs. Would have been the wide receiver 17 with that kind of average. Daniel Jones loves the slot. It's most likely that he is going to be the starting quarterback. What's that face? What's that face? Phrasing?
I'll let you hear it back yourself later.
Phrasing? Yeah. Okay. Well, no. Yeah. All right. Well, Moving on. He loves throwing the football to the slot receiver. He's done it plenty of times throughout his career. I mean, even last year, we saw Wan'Dale Robinson 140 targets on the season. The Colts O-line has gotten so much worse. And so this is going to be one of those things where I don't know that Daniel Jones is going to have a lot of time to sit back there and go and look for Michael Pittman to get open. He's going to have to get that ball out quick. And nobody gets open on that team quite like Josh Downs does, especially in the short intermediate areas. So the targets are going to be there a bunch. And we've actually seen that Daniel Jones, when he gets pressured, he is not only going to the slot, or excuse me, he is going to be going to the slot. And Josh Downs had the sixth most routes run from the slot. He had the fourth most yards in the NFL from the slot. This is a guy that, if you go through all of our friend Matt Harmon, his reception perception on Josh Downs, everything, whether it's man, zone, whatever, regardless of situation, he is open consistently. This is going to be a player that's going to be the best friend of Daniel Jones. And I don't want to get a little too presumptuous on this and say we could see a Daniel Jones renaissance, but there's been one of these quarterbacks every year where it was Geno, then it was Baker, then it was Darnold. I don't know. Could we see another former New York quarterback have himself a good year? I don't want to say it too loud, but yeah, I think it's very possible, Dave.
Yeah, I just checked my ranking on Daniel Jones, and it is disgustingly high. But we have to remember, like, this guy was the QB9 the year before he tore his ACL.
Disgustingly high.
Yeah, I mean, that is a bet that I am willing to make is on Daniel Jones. Some good weapons around him too: Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, Tyler Warren there now, and of course Jonathan Taylor to keep defenses honest. So, yeah, I'm weirdly excited about this Colts offense. Things changed so quickly. Like 3 years ago, Shane Steichen was like the hottest name in coaching circles. Everybody was so excited about him being in Indianapolis after what he did with Jalen Hurts. And then it didn't work out with Anthony Richardson. But now he's got another mobile quarterback and Daniel Jones, and he gets to kind of re-roll his offense again with some good weapons around him. And I think that you're very right. Daniel Jones loves throwing to slot receivers. Josh Down has been great in that role. You and I are both well ahead of consensus on Josh Downs for good reason.
Yeah, this is a guy I think a lot of people are going to look and say, well, there's not a big ceiling there. And I think we've made that case with Giants wide receivers a lot, that there hasn't been the ceiling there when Daniel Jones is under center. And then those guys do nothing but produce. And I'm not going to try to comp Josh Downs to Malik Neighbors because Malik Neighbors is one of one, but Josh Downs is incredibly talented. And I think that we might be underselling how high the ceiling is for him with Daniel Jones at quarterback in the Colts offense.
Yeah, I mean,
All
we
right.
see these slot receivers just print fantasy points. Sometimes it's that easy. And if Josh Downs is playing this full-time slot role, he's going to get a lot of targets.
All right, Dave. I don't know how else to transition this, but we're going to stay in the New York area. Go to from a former Giant to a new Giant. There we go. Or a current Giant. Nope.
There you go.
Still butchered it. Doesn't matter.
Nice
Tyrone
flow,
Tracy.
yeah.
Tyrone Tracy, running back for the New York Giants. Average draft position, running back 31. I've got him ranked as running back 34. Dave, you're right there at ADP, running back 32. So I wonder if that ADP is going to continue to drop as things get closer to the season for Tyrone Tracy because of, more things coming out on Cam Scattaboo and what whoever Russell Wilson is gelling with at practices, and maybe Jackson Dart is going to be starting sooner than possible, and he presents a different type of upside. There's always these things that change our perception of players, and I think this is another reminder that regardless of where ADP is and where our rankings are, a player can still be considered a breakout. Right.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I was kind of surprised actually when we compared this to ADP, that ADP was so high on Tyrone Tracy, because it seems like all I hear is excitement around Cam Scattaboo. And he's a fun player. He's got a fun name to say, and he's got fun highlights and fun clips of him barfing on the sidelines during bowl games. I mean, I understand like why people like Cam Scattaboo, but they're just such different players, and Tyrone Tracy just has elite athleticism across the board. 4.48 40-yard dash, 9.77 relative athletic score in the vertical jump and the broad jump and the shuttle cone and the 3-cone drills. He marked elite grades in every single one of those. And he fell a little bit in the draft in round 5 because he's a converted wide receiver and he only had 1 year of playing running back under his belt. But that experience as a receiver gives him extra opportunities in the receiving game. Last year was kind of weird because that was actually one of his biggest issues were his hands. He had 5 fumbles, he had 5 drops. One of those drops was a tipped pass that ended up becoming a game-losing interception for the Giants. So definitely want to see him able to reel those uh, missteps in a little bit going into year 2. But when I look at Cam Scadaboo, like I said, fun player, man. Like there's a lot to like about Cam Scadaboo, but you look at the athleticism and like I said, Tyrone Tracy, 4.48 40-yard dash. Cam Scadaboo, 4.71. Tyrone Tracy, 9.77 relative athletic score. Cam Scadaboo, 7.42. And I think Cam Scadaboo's relative athletic score would have been even worse if he did some of the drills, but he didn't even participate in the agility drills. After having a terrible 40 time, he just opted out of the 3-cone and shuttle. And that concerns me a little bit. Strength was one of his biggest factors that we liked about Cam Scadaboo. 17 reps on the bench press doesn't really get me all that excited either. Came in a little bit smaller than expected, under 5'10". And he did have good scores in the vert and broad jump, and those are important, especially for running backs with explosiveness. But to me, it seems pretty apparent that Tyrone Tracy is a guy that they're going to want out on the field, and I think Scadaboo is going to come in on some short down and distance and some goal line work and could cap the ceiling there. But still, I want to bet on the guy with game-breaking athleticism and upside. Tyrone Tracy is going to be the primary pass catcher. He's going to be the guy that's going to be able to consistently rip off big plays. And while I think there's going to be an annoying dose of Cam Scadaboo and maybe even some Devin Singletary in the mix, I still think that the upside is there for Tyrone Tracy because of what he brings to the table as a pass catcher and what he brings with his athleticism and an ability to rip off big plays. I say it all the time. Those are the two things I want in running backs, guys who catch passes and make big plays. Tyrone Tracy can do both of those.
And I think the thing that entices me about Tyrone Tracy, even though I'm not really all that high on him, is that I think this Giants team is going to be pretty bad on offense, but good on defense. And I think this is a team that with a young quarterback or maybe even a struggling Russell Wilson, they're going to want to try to control the ball a bit more and maybe run that ball a bit more than we have seen in the past. I know Malik Neighbors is still going to get his targets, but outside of him, there's not really much else on this in this receiving core to be excited about. And if Jackson Dart is out there, there's a good shot that we could be seeing a guy that's just spray and pray when it comes to throwing the deep ball. He could be Dave, no, we don't laugh. I gotta stop saying
reeled
things,
in,
man. I gotta stop saying words.
Bonk.
But yeah, I can see this as a team that's going to be winning or at least trying to win ugly football, sort of the way we saw a lot with the Steelers last year, where they're going to be winning those 17-14 games or losing those 17-14 games because Brian Daboll is just going to be trying to keep his job. Like, this is not a team. I know Jameis Winston is on the roster. I don't think we're going to see him in the games because it just presents too much of a variable at quarterback. And right now they're going to kind of want to control as much as they can. So Tyrone Tracy, yeah.
Can I totally big brain a Tyrone Tracy take for a second too? Wan'Dale Robinson last year, 140 targets and couldn't even eclipse 700 yards. Like one of the most inefficient high volume seasons we have ever seen in NFL history. Mm-hmm. Now you're telling me Tyrone Tracy, this guy with game-breaking athleticism, better size than Wan'Dale Robinson, former receiver, and now they do have Scadaboo in the mix. What if we do see Scadaboo playing, a little bit more running back than expected, but we see Tyrone Tracy get pushed into that Wan'Dale Robinson role where he's just working as an extension of the run game, playing out of the slot, playing out of the backfield. Again, might be big bringing it a little bit, but they have, extra running backs now and not a lot of depth at wide receiver. We might see more creative usage from Tyrone Tracy this year.
I think you do your players a disservice if you don't find the most creative ways to get them involved, especially when they are as skilled and as athletic as he is. Just going to say that. All right, next guy on here, Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. And Dave, this has been a player that we've talked about a ton, so I'm not going to be too long on this one, but he's got an ADP right now of wide receiver 41 still, and that's one that I think might start to creep up or honestly, it could go the other way around, depending on what sort of news we hear about Brandon Ayuk as we get closer to the season. But
the news we're getting now is that he's going to be on PUP to start the year.
So there you go. But you've got him at wide receiver 34. I've got him at wide receiver 35, Pearsall that is, and I think that a lot of people look at last year and say, well, he really didn't do much until the end. We need so much context to this. So much context. The same way we needed context to Jameson Williams. That is so hard to go back and forth, by the way, between Jameis Winston and Jameson Williams over and over and over verbally. But yeah, we need the context for Ricky Pearsall's rookie season. He got shot in the chest in August, right before the season starts. He missed 6 weeks, comes back, starts slow, obviously, after getting shot, missed a lot of practice time, had to get back up to speed in the NFL. That is the thing we talk about all the time, is how the NFL is so much faster for rookies than it is for them to play in college. So you got a guy who needs to get up to speed, learn the playbook, find out what his role is. The team doesn't even know what his role is because they haven't had the opportunity to explore that in practices. So what happens? You get him in this weird sort of gadget role just to be like, hey man, let's just get the ball in his hands. He's our first round pick. Let's see what we can do. You know, we've got injuries along the wide receiver room. Let's just get him involved somehow. All of a sudden they're seeing, okay, we're giving him more routes to run. He's getting open consistently. Oh, okay. Final couple weeks of the season. Look at what he's doing. He goes out there, final 2 games, averaging 7 receptions on 9 targets per game, has some of the best performances from a wide receiver in fantasy football on the season over those final 2 weeks. And honestly, Dave, we talked about how some of these teams are not going to have good defenses and might have to throw the ball a bunch. The Niners are one of those where their defense is not going to be quite as good as last year. They're relying on a lot of, I don't want to say unknown guys, but lesser known guys, and then some rookies along that defensive line. So I could see this Niners offense having to pass a whole lot more, especially, and I hate to say it, especially if we just don't have the same Christian McCaffrey that we've had in the past.
Yeah, and it's really tough for me to, the upside for Christian McCaffrey is so obvious, but there is a immense risk there that he's just not the guy that
Yeah.
he was, and George Kittle is great. I'm not going to write off George Kittle for getting up there in age yet because he's still producing and looking like the best tight end in football. But if they go into week 1 and the receiver room is Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall, I know who I'm scheming plays up for, and I think Kyle Shanahan will do the same. Um, I don't usually like talk about other analysts on this show, but I know he's got thick skin. He could take it. Akash, our friend on Twitter, I was unplugged for the weekend and I
Yeah,
opened
I
up
saw
Twitter.
it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw it,
Uh-huh.
Akash.
Yeah. I was unplugged over the weekend and I opened up my phone Sunday when I got home. And the first tweet that I see says Ricky Pearsall sucks and has hundreds of likes. And I was like, why do I even open this app? Like, what are we doing here? Like, Ricky Pearsall sucks. This man got shot in the chest. The fact that he was able to step on a field at all last year was a miracle. He established himself as a wide receiver 1 on this team over the back half of the season. We're talking about a first-round pick with athleticism who was able to carve out a role after missing all of preseason, all of training camp, the beginning of the year. I mean, I am a huge Ricky Pearsall fan. I just reshared it on Twitter for anyone that wants to go check it out. Just the highlights from his game against Detroit. You saw it, the first play of the game. They run this double end around, reverse to Ricky Pearsall. He hurdles over a guy, and they just said, all right, Ricky's feeling it today. And they just kept drawing plays up for him. And that's the upside that I see here. It's going to be a wide open receiver room where he could easily be the number 2 guy behind George Kittle. This is such an easy bet to make, but people, for whatever reason, just get bogged down in the numbers and bogged down in the data. And they say, well, his production year 1 was okay, and just throw all context out the window. And if that opens up a buying opportunity, I am getting so much Ricky Pearsall this offseason.
It's funny because we talk so much about public perception, but a lot of that perception, I feel like it all misses context. And whether you're a data bro or you're just the person who happened to see that one game with your friends at the bar, we kind of let one piece of information determine the rest of our opinion there without the rest of the context. We do this all the time, whether it was a guy like who I mentioned earlier, Roma Dunze, Jameson Williams, Ricky Pearsall. We just remove context from the situation far too often and make these declarative statements like, sorry, Akash, man, I hate to do it to you again. Like, Ricky Pearsall sucks. Like, the dude doesn't suck, okay? Akash, you're awesome, man. Sorry.
Yeah,
Not,
we
not
like
trying to dunk
Akash,
on you.
of course. Yeah. And
Good
the one
guy.
thing I'll say, adding context too. Sorry, Joe, but like the badass factor for Ricky Pearsall is off the charts. Not only did he get shot, he got shot, chased the guy down who shot him, and then got one off on him. Like, we're talking about John Wick out here playing football. Like, this is a
Okay.
real life
Okay.
superhero. Like,
Okay.
come on. This is, I don't know
Okay.
how you could not put a bet on Ricky Pearsall this year.
I need some confirmation on that story because I never heard that last part that he
Yes.
went full John Wick on someone.
No, he shot the guy who shot him with the, yeah, actually happened.
Wait, what do you mean he shot the guy who shot him? Was he walking around strapped?
No, he chased the guy down and got his gun, and then while the guy was fleeing, shot him. Yes.
This is amazing. This is amazing.
Yes.
I need
Like,
to go
that's what
do
I'm
some more
saying. Off
Googling
the
here.
charts. Yes.
Ricky Pearsall, man. Look at you. Just cool points off the scale right now. I always thought Ricky Pearsall was more of like a Timothy Chalamet kind of guy. Looks like he's more of a Keanu Reeves type of dude. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Dave, we
Next
got two more
breakout
players
player. Sorry, I
left.
got way too
Yeah.
worked up about Ricky Pearsall there.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, if I would have known that he's running around here just
John
being
Wicking
a
people.
superhero, yeah, no, it's totally different. It's rightfully to get distracted here.
Yeah.
All right, we got two players left. Talk to us about Trey Benson, running back for the Arizona Cardinals. His average draft position, running back 46. Dave, I've got him at running back 43. You have him at running back 38. So you got some high hopes for Trey Benson.
Yeah, just another really good prospect here. And this is what I do is I bet on young, talented players. And Trey Benson is just that. And when you look at his season last year, very much so a tale of two seasons, he was awful to start the year because he's one of those guys that has game-breaking speed. I mean, you look at his size-adjusted speed, 98th percentile. He ran a 4.39 at 6 foot, 216 pounds. And when you're in college, you can get away with bouncing outside and just ripping off chunk plays. And I think that's what we saw a lot of like Caleb Johnson doing last year. I think it's a very comparable, a guy who was able to use that size speed combo to just get away from players and consistently rip off big plays. The transition to the NFL, it doesn't work like that. We saw last year, he tried bouncing around outside and he'd get pulled down in the backfield consistently. So Drew Petzig and Jonathan Gannon, they agreed to put him on a little timeout for a few weeks where he wasn't getting any touches and he was watching from the sidelines. And when he came back after that stint, yards after contact per attempt went up. He was hitting the hole more decisively. He was accelerating through contact. All of the things that we want to see from a big 6 foot, nearly 220-pound running back. And I think that sitting behind James Conner helped him learn some of those things a little bit. James Conner is a very decisive and aggressive runner, and that's what they wanted from Trey Benson. And that's what we saw over the second half of the season. So you look at James Conner now going into his age 29 season. I am not going to use this time to besmirch the name of James Conner because he has been aging like a bottle of fine wine. I mean, just career efficiency over the last 2 years. I believe he had set a career high in yardage last year. I mean, he's been great, but at the end of the day, never played a full season in his entire career. He averages about 3 missed games per season. So you look at the opportunity there for Trey Benson, whether it is in a spot start, whether it's 3 spot starts, or whether it's, they get to the second half of the season and they see that James Conner is on an expiring contract and they say, let's see what we have in Trey Benson. There are multiple outs for him to have contingent upside, whether it be just a weekly plug and play or we get half a season or a full season from him. Long term, like if we're talking dynasty, Trey Benson is a guy that I'm trying to get on as many rosters as I can. But even in redraft, whether it be that changing of the guard this year or a spot start here and there, I want Trey Benson because if the opportunity is there, he's going to be a top 10 running back.
Yeah, I think all of this just comes down to how you value a handcuff in fantasy football or how you value, it doesn't even have to be your handcuff. It's just a running back handcuff or even someone else. And I think that's exactly it, Dave. It's having Trey Benson this high is not talking badly or poorly, excuse me, about James Conner. This is just
Right.
really liking the role that we see for the running back in the Arizona Cardinals offense. Because I think it's also fair to say that if James Conner were to go down, it's the Trey Benson show. It's not like he's splitting with another person. From what I remember, it's Amari DeMercado there. Is he still on the roster?
Michael Carter is still there as well.
Michael Carter.
Yeah, a bunch of names.
Trey Benson's a high draft capital guy. He's got the body build for all 3 downs. He can do it. This is one of these things where he's gonna have a ton of value if he gets a role there.
We see this all the time too. Like where guys don't do a lot as rookies, running backs. I talked about this at the top of the show. The game's too fast for them, a little too strong for them. Once they get a season under their belt, slows down a little bit. You see it almost all the time. These guys from year 1 to year 2 add an extra 5-10 pounds of muscle. They get that grown man strength. And it's just wild that after, a promising prospect who we knew had an established veteran in front of him, and then going into year 2, everybody just forgets about his name. No, I'm way in on Trey Benson still.
All right, last guy. Talked about him before, talked about him a couple times, and I'm going to keep preaching the gospel on Drake May, quarterback for the New England Patriots. And Dave, right now, ADP's got him at quarterback 16. I think you and I have him ranked where his ADP will end up. come draft season. And that's, I've got him at quarterback 13. You've got him at quarterback 14. And I think that we are not the only, by the way, like this is not some groundbreaking thing or some like player that we've pulled out of the rubble here to give you guys. I know that a lot of fantasy analysts are talking about Drake May, but it's for good reason. Okay. This is a guy who has just fantastic rushing upside. Last year, he was averaging more rushing yards per game than Josh Allen, the league MVP, the guy who we are all taking as the unequivocal quarterback 1 or 2 in every single fantasy draft. And what we always look for are these guys that can be drafted late that have the rushing upside. And Dave, late round quarterback strategy is still very much alive. Nearly half of last year's QB1s, meaning top 12 quarterbacks, were drafted in round 9 or later. And a lot of these guys ended up having rushing upside. And that's kind of what we see here, whether it's Justin Fields, who's another guy that's going late in drafts. I don't know if we can call him breakout because he just kind of keeps doing the same thing, but just kind of perennially undervalued. Drake May is the guy who right now I believe is being undervalued. The Patriots' entire ecosystem around him, their offense, has improved. They bring in a new offensive coordinator, a new head coach, 5 new offensive linemen, 3+ new wide receivers to catch passes, a new running back that's a really good pass blocker and a really good receiver out of the backfield. And this offense is just going to be better. They're going to have more opportunities for scoring. And even though Drake May last year had such a good average rushing yardage per game, he was never able to really get into the end zone. And that's a thing with the New England Patriots just never being in scoring position because that offensive line was absolutely atrocious. This year, we should see them in scoring position a bit more. And I mean, Drake May, he's got the size, he's got the ability. He could be another one of these players that kind of benefits from being a goal line quarterback who gets some of these draws up the middle. So yeah, I think not only could we see the rushing totals increase for him, but the rushing touchdowns and the overall passing touchdowns too at an offense that should be really, really improved this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, this is an easy bet to make. And something Jeff Bell and I, we talked about this on the Dynasty show yesterday, and it's something that's been on my mind a lot. We all like Drake May, but if you look at the receivers, they're getting no respect at all. Like nobody knows which receiver to take in New England, so they just don't want to take anybody. But man, if you've been paying attention to the beat, Kyle Williams is getting a strong drum beat, but Demario Douglas is the guy that people have just been raving about. And now with Josh McDaniels coming back into the picture, I feel like this has been the slot show. We've talked so much about slot receivers. We started off talking about Amon St. Brown, we talked about Josh Downs, but Josh McDaniels also, the slot role in that offense has been a very prolific role. And we've seen Danny Amendola and Wes Welker and who's the other guy I'm thinking of?
They're all the same person.
Right.
Corporate wants you to identify the difference between these two pictures.
And I
Same
think
picture.
people see those guys, and Julian Edelman was the other guy I was thinking of, and they think,
Like
well,
I said, same picture.
yeah. And they see that, and they say, well, Efton Kizm must be next up to be that slot receiver. But
It's because of the way he runs routes.
Yeah. But I think it's Demario Douglas is the established slot receiver there. And I'm more bullish on Drake May, the consensus, but Demario Douglas is also the guy. We want to talk about another like late, potential breakout player. I'm like 20 spots above ADP on Demario Douglas because I think people are just completely wrong. Sounds like Stephon Diggs is going to start the year on PUP, which could open up even more of an opportunity. But this is one of those, not just am I trying to invest in Drake May, but I want to draft Travion Henderson. I want to draft Kyle Williams. I want to draft Demario Douglas. Like there are a lot of young weapons here. And if he's able to take that step forward, he's going to pull all the players on the team up around him. So I'm just in on the Patriots offense this year.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I kind of hate what happened in our Football Guys magazine mock draft that we did, where I was the guy that took quarterback first. I hated where I was in a certain round. No spoilers. I'm not going to give it away, but I just didn't like anything. And I went with Josh Allen, took the first quarterback off the board. And
then you sit there looking at Drake May in like round 16 and you're like, why did I do this?
And the thing, and like that is, every show that I have been on where I've talked about breakouts and sleepers and draft strategy, it has always been me saying, I want to be the late round quarterback guy. I want to take quarterback last in my draft. I want to be taking the guy who's ranked quarterback 13, 14, 15, 16. And then I just go and absolutely just vomit when I get faced with an actual draft in front of me. Yeah, Drake May is one of the guys I'm going for. Drake May, Caleb Williams, Justin Fields, all these guys that have some rushing upside that are going far too late in drafts. I want a piece of them.
It's a good year for late round quarterback. It is very much so back on the menu. I mean, it's crazy when you look down in ADP that you can get like Michael Penix as like the QB 25 this year. And it's like, this guy could realistically be a top 5 quarterback. And like, you just get further and further down that list and you realize it's definitely a good year to wait on quarterback. Also, I had to fact check myself a little bit, Alfredo. There are some conflicting reports. The Ricky Pearsall's assailant, Ricky Pearsall and his assailant were fighting, and he left the altercation with a gunshot in his forearm. But there are some conflicting reports as to whether Pearsall got the shot off or whether a bystander got a shot off.
Okay.
Either way, Ricky Pearsall chased this man down, fought him, and he left the battle with a gunshot wound. So take that how you will. Either way, I'm not taking away from what Ricky Pearsall did. He's an awesome dude.
Ricky Pearsall, man. The legend of Ricky Pearsall continues to grow. All right, well, this was a good show, man. This was a fun one. We went through all of our breakouts for the upcoming season, and we're going to be back again next week, like every week. Every Tuesday, we're going to be bringing you this show, and then as we get closer to the season, we'll start to ramp up and give you 2 and 3 episodes a week. And then in season, we're back to 4 episodes a week. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.